Here's what I think. When I said in bed with, they're in collusion. So I thought I'd pull this up and let this be a starting point for this video. Secret or illegal cooperation or conspiracy, especially in order to cheat or deceive others. Okay? If she was being raped, which I do not believe, then it was in secret because she didn't turn him in, made no reports on her dad whatsoever. The reports made, as hard as it is to believe, and yes, I can understand the shocking nature of this, she turned me in instead. And it was unsubstantiated. I've gone over that in another video, but this is what in bed with in that way means. So we can go ahead and open that up if you want to see the rest of the. It's just somebody's way of saying collusion when they say in bed with. It's like perhaps corrupt politicians in bed with other, corrupt people or the devil or whoever. So that's what that was about. And John Mayer's heart problem, I went over that in the last video. That was a hell of a week for me because my parents were in the post office union and my mom was the president of the ladies auxiliary, and so they would get chosen or elected, whatever, to go to conventions. And I'd been going to conventions since I was like 10 years old. I've gone, excuse me, I'd gone to a number of them throughout my life. Well, at that point in time, I wasn't a member of the auxiliary, I don't think. If I was, I didn't go to meetings, and my mom would probably have picked up my dues, just in case I'd go to a dinner or something with them. But they had gone down to Joplin or Springfield. I went to one at Springfield, and we stayed at the Red Carpet Inn, and I ate at Korea House number 2 when my dad would take me on their break over to pick up some Korean food because I didn't want to eat hotel food, and I wasn't a part of their meetings or as a delegate, so I would just run over there, and it wasn't expensive, but it was sure good. And they said Elvis Presley had stayed at the Red Carpet Inn at a previous time, but it was kind of cool. It had nice indoor pools and big palm trees inside. It was a nice place. And during that week, while they were gone, um, my son died. Bradley died that week. And wait a minute, let me get this right in my mind again. John Myers was in the hospital with his heart attack, and my Uncle John had to be admitted to ICU for something wrong with his lungs. And yeah, Brad had died. And that's when I was still on chlorpromazine for so many problems that you might be able to recognize that I do have. Excuse me, and I don't deny it. It's just some of the times they ball me up in different ways. But in the back of my mind, I could hear that monitor Bradley wore sounding off in his room across the hall. And you got to know what chlorpromazine. It's heavy, what it is. It's heavy duty antidepressant is what I had it for. and I believe it was 50 milligrams, but that's a long time ago, 27 years. So if I don't get my doses right, please don't hold it against me. But miraculously, I talked myself into getting up because the monitor's going off. The monitor's going off. You got to get up. Although the medicine is quickly hammering me down. I get in his room, flip on the light. There lay little Bradley in his crib, blue. Imagine my shock and horror, okay? And we had to the whole family, except for my sister and their bunch, had to learn CPR. Well, Dad already had known it. It didn't matter. He had to take the course anyway. Little refresher course. Didn't kill anybody, but it's like, okay, we'll take it. Before we could bring him home. So I had it too. And when I tried to make sense of that situation in my moment of horror and shock, CPR had left me. Maybe taken the second course of it after having already had that embedded in my fabric of being, wiped out the whole thing. You know, people try to recoach someone in their head. It's not a good thing. It's definitely not a good thing. So I'm standing there thinking they're really going to put me in prison if this kid dies, because they had tried to put me in prison for the first one dying. And after they had the autopsy performed and results came back, of course by then they realized he had died of SID, sudden infant death syndrome. We live close to the tracks, and they say the tracks of the low sound is what contributed to him not being able uh, to realize that he needed to wake up. Something like that. Um, so I shook my son, thinking, okay, if I don't try, I'm damned if I do, damned if I don't here. If my son dies, I'm damned. I'm double damned if they decide that I could have prevented it. I'm triple damned if they decide they want to throw me in prison for it. So I shook him. Not real hard, just enough to get him to think in his sleeping state to wake up. And he did. He came back screaming, thank God. Thank God. And with no brain damage. So little Bradley was dead. My son, who's now 27, has a job, served the U.S. Marine Corps, has a girlfriend, you know, got his ham radio license here recently, alive and well, because I dared to shake him, because I couldn't remember CPR, because they sent a baby home to a mother who they knew was on chlorpromazine, which brings us to attempted murder. Okay, they didn't believe me when I told them the first son had something wrong with him. Then he died. And I was telling everybody who I could get to look in my eyes. Anybody who would listen, I was telling it to. Oh, you're crazy. Just take your meds, you know. Yeah. He died. Brad would have died. But I think that was a plot by them. I know. I know what that sounds like. Believe me, I realize what crazy is on account of not being crazy myself. I do have brain damage, which isn't crazy, okay? A lot of people have brain damage, and they are high-functioning people, okay? They sent a child they knew that had apnea, or a potential apnea, home on a monitor, a sleep monitor, which drove us bonkers, by the way. Every time he'd pull a contact loose, it would sound off. You think that was easy? To a mom on chlora freaking promazine. So, my story is so laced with other people's insanity that I know it's unbelievable. And I do realize that they try to make something so unbelievable to discredit whoever's trying to tell their story. But hell, they had me labeled crazy so that probably when my call went in that morning to 911 about Bradley dying, they probably wrote it off automatically as crazy, which they shouldn't have. They should have taken the first one as a clue that I wasn't crazy, because I said he was going to die, or that something was wrong with him. I mean, I told him something's wrong with my son. Oh, you're hysterical. And I stayed calm about it too, because I realized that's what I needed to do. My dad was a medic, and I had training all along, health class, scouts, uh, Red Cross. You stay calm in emergencies. That's your best bet. It did me no good at that point, because they would have taken, for instance, on the second child who I was calling about, oh, that's that lady that everybody said was crazy and then her son died. Said she was crazy because there's something wrong with her son, but they'd rather spend their time laughing in her face than to check it out. You know? So then Bradley nearly died on the monitor because they sent me home with a baby on a monitor with chlorpromazine. They tried to set me up, I'm telling you. They tried repeatedly. I don't know how many times right now. It makes me weary. These people are going to get called out. They're going to get called on the carpet, in other words. Durwood Goose, another one. They played us all along. And I'll try to get that story in the next video. But what I wanted to talk about in this video was John Myers' heart problems. Totally ignored. Totally ignored. And these people are pretty close down here, I'm pretty sure. At least they were when I hung around with some of them. Because I had a friend back in the 70s whose dad was a cop. Well, I had a couple of them, but this one lived right over here within walking distance, across the alley and across 9th Street behind us here. I'm on 10th. Her daddy was a cop, and her sister dated a guy that was on the ambulance crew. So back then I knew those people to be rather close. The different 9/11 people had their little clique. So I don't know about now, but back then the information could have been related. But when it got to present day, rather 27 years ago present day, it wasn't the same. They couldn't relate that, oh, that's Mrs. Myers. That call she made on her son being sick and something wrong with him and was scaring her, and then he died. We better take this a little more seriously. Didn't happen, folks. Didn't happen, and my baby's in a grave. The thank you would belong to Sedalia.